If I can now introduce you to Batool Toma, who is a Research and Education Officer at the Islamic Foundation. She converted to Islam about 25 years ago and has been very active with the New Muslim project in the Islamic Foundation in Markfield.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm not going to talk about my journey to Islam because unlike Yvonne's, it's very boring and there's nothing much to tell except that I had 10 brothers and sisters, so my jihad started straight away. And unlike Aisha, I was brought up in a home where religion was talked about all the time. And I should greet you now with the greeting that we always greeted people with as Irish and Catholics, Diogach, God be with you. And that was our Gaelic greeting and one that we were all brought up with, and the words of God were on our lips all the time with God bless you, please God, thank God, and so on and so forth. But assalamu alaikum to you all. Peace and blessings of God be upon you. I thought that I would just divert slightly from this because I've been looking after converts to Islam here in the UK for the last 10 years. Through the New Muslim project here, you'll see it on your right, and providing the services that we have provided through that project. And I'm sure many of you will have received copies of Meeting Point, which is our newsletter, and which is specifically for converts to Islam and is posted out to at least 5,000 in the UK every quarter. It's written by converts, for converts, and addressing the idea that you can be British and be Muslim and there is no conflict between the two. Having said that, I thought I'd take you back a little bit, because we have lots of famous converts to Islam in the UK. Conversion is something that has been going on for centuries here. And I didn't want to go back too far. We don't have time for that. But just back to around 1856, William Henry Quilliam, who was the son of a wealthy watch manufacturer, and whose family originated in the Manx, the Isle of Man. He was sent to Morocco, as many people from high-class families were sent abroad to broaden their education and to get a breadth of knowledge and experience from abroad. And he went to Morocco. He returned to Liverpool in 1889 as Sheikh Abdullah Quilliam. And of course, the Liverpool Mosque in Broughton Terrace came about in 1889, and he was the instigator of the Crescent Weekly and the Islamic Review Monthly, which were amazing magazines of that time. Absolutely, and I would encourage any of you to go and try to find the archives where these magazines still exist, and they are full of the most wonderful material you could ever imagine to come across. He established the Medina Home Care for Children and the Muslim College, Science and Law debating societies, and he established singing from Quilliam's collection of hymns. So you can see there's a picture of the mosque there, and up in one corner, up here on the right-hand corner, was the organ. Now, it wasn't a big wind organ or pipe organ, it was just a foot pedal organ. And he took hymns from the background, the Christian Church of England background, and he modified them. He took out anything that was remotely, Catholic or Church of England, and he put in there something which was Islamically acceptable, so that he sort of maintained a kind of familiarity for those people who were converting to Islam in Liverpool. And there were so many at that time who were converting to Islam in Liverpool at the time. And if some of you have gotten one of the meeting points, you see on the front of it, Muslim Songs of the British Isles, on the front cover. And that is an effort by Abdul Hakim Murad, another quite eloquent convert of our times, who has gathered together all of these hymns and poems by Quilliam and put them together in a small book of Muslim songs. Anyway, he was regarded as this arch-infidel and renegade from the Christian faith. This was Abdullah Quilliam, but he was given the title of Sheikh al-Islam al-Britannia by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire at the time, and enjoyed all the glory and the benefits that could bring him. Then, of course, we had the Woking Mission, 1889, and that led to quite a number of of very famous converts, Lord Headley, who converted to Islam in 1914, and he started the British Muslim Society. And there was a wonderful lady called Lady Evelyn Cobbold, and she actually tried to convert Lord Headley at a dinner in London. They were at a very prestigious dinner in London, and he was telling her all about Islam and all about the things he had learned about. And she actually had lived much of what he was telling her about, because she traveled the Muslim world. So she tried to persuade him to convert there and then, and said that the waiters would do as the witnesses. But he was a little bit shy, and he sort of backed off. But only a couple of years later, he announced his conversion. Those copies. There was a wonderful lady called Mary Perkins. I just absolutely love this woman, and I would love to know about her family and her ancestors and so on. She was the most wonderful poet. She wrote the most beautiful spiritual poetry one could ever imagine. And there's a lovely ode to Woking Mosque there. I'm sure it was written on the construction of Woking Mosque. It's beautiful. I wish I could read it for you. Anyway, I just took a few of these things because I thought I'd divert a little bit. It's nice to know about these things. This little old lady, you can see her sitting here in her horse and carriage, Mrs. Sophia Ahmed Faris, and she was regarded as a learned Muslim lady. Now, I think they used to respect ladies a lot more that time than they do now. Imagine a learned Muslim lady. And she passed away at the residence of her granddaughter, Mrs. Walter Reginald Legg. So obviously, you know, there were whole families coming to Islam. And check out the hijab there. I mean, come on. Is that what, you know, living, you know, having Islam, you know, integrated into your culture or not? She was wearing the usual sort of Victorian-style dress with her hat, as all Victorian women did, because if they went out without one, they were considered to be of a lower class and not respectable women. So I think it looks quite interesting. And in fact, you know, I actually don't accept that this piece of chiffon keeps me warm on the hard winter days up in Middle England, where I come from. I live in Leicester. So I resort back to my best furry hat with my scarf. So I think we can, you know, explore these things in terms of hijab or covering, you know, in terms of our cultural backgrounds and so on. These are other photographs of Muslim families, people who came to Islam. In fact, you know, the whole family came, the granddaughter, the aunts, the mother-in-laws, John Yahya Parkinson up here on the top, and a British Muslim family, and the Welsh family on the bottom. And this is a wonderful photograph of an Eid party at Woking Mosque. Fantastic. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's a fantastic photograph. And you have all the Muslims sitting around, and you have all the ladies sitting there, and all of the ladies are wearing their English cultural dress as part of their Islamic dress, because they wore high-necked dresses and hats. It was part of the respect that a woman took from society by going out dressed in her hat and her dresses, which I thought was very interesting there. Conversion, a general view, it's as common as baked bread. It's been going on for centuries, well over the years. Mass conversions in the 60s, we often heard, you know, there were all these New Age movements, and there was a kind of this idea that people were being brainwashed. And I know that in Ireland, people were really sort of, you know, bizarrely caught up in all of these things. Kidnapped back from groups and sects and all these kind of things. But this is not the same with Islam. When we talk about conversion, the word convert here, to revolve or to turn around or to head in a different direction, to take something and to just completely do a U-turn. You've seen them on the motorway. Just going one way and suddenly you're going the other way. It's a vocation or a calling by divine appointment, in my opinion. Lots of people would like to tell you that it's something that happens because of a huge crisis in one's life. But look, for goodness sake, if we all considered life, we stagger from one crisis to another all of the time, between weddings, marriages, funerals, you know, babies being born, you know, all sorts of things. So we could all pinpoint lots of crises in our lives if we wanted to, for certain things. I personally believe that it is a divine calling by divine appointment. And even though I have been sitting with people who have converted to Islam coming into my office all of the time, I am still completely overwhelmed when somebody tells me they want to convert to Islam. It shakes me to my very roots, really, because subhanAllah, I think of society out there, I think of, what must have inspired them to come to Islam, to read about Islam, and there's such a huge gap there that it's really phenomenal. Somebody said it's a move of such profound consequences that I suspect it will be many years before the effect can even begin to realize. And many converts, there's a thing called continuing conversion. And I think we all continue to go through that process of metamorphosis all of the time. Tied to an event in time, but never ending. It doesn't end when you make your shahada. In fact, it only begins. And in fact, a lot of the crises that converts to Islam go through begin on making your shahada. An accident predominantly of the heart and limbs, because obviously we make our shahada and then we follow that up through our ritual prayers and fasting and so on. It has many stages, and many people have tried to organize it in a kind of a structure to let us know what are the stages people go through. But people move forward and backwards through different stages before they actually decide to make their conversion. The context can be, the environment of change can be huge. It can be macrocosm or microcosm. It can be on a huge scale or on a very small scale. One Muslim said it's ultimately impossible to explain why people become Muslim, and more especially, why they should remain so. Because of the lack of support, the lack of resources that we have available to support new Muslims. It's unbelievable. And I have to say that right now. We have so many organizations in the UK.
Have your attention, please.
No.
Islam Expo will close this evening at 6 o'clock. The exhibition will close this evening at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, why they should remain so. So many organizations involved in giving the message of Islam, but nobody involved in dealing with those who respond to it. And the New Muslim Project has been in force for the last 10 years. And I have to say that the support we get from the community is really abysmal. But alhamdulillah, we keep going, and inshallah, it will get better. Different stages of conversion, I can't really go through them all because I have a very short time. But people move from one stage to another, and eventually they move into that desire, that need to want to practice Islam, to start to fast. I remember, I'm sure they all remember the time we fasted first. I thought I was going to die. We think we're going to starve to death. So we go out the day before Ramadan, and we absolutely jam the fridge packed full of stuff. The light, you can't even see the light going on. But we live through it, as each day passes, we realize that this is an exercise, but it's only in years to follow that we realize the spiritual effects. Everything can be very physical in the early stages, but the physical effects come later. Decision time, whether it's public or private, rituals of participation, unraveling religious authority and Islam from tradition and culture. Oh my goodness me. How do you deal with that, It is such a minefield. But alhamdulillah, it's exciting, it's a challenge. The consequences can be incredible, depending on the intention of your conversion. It's a very long journey. It's the creation of a new self, but there can be a lot of crises. For instance, loss of identity. It's amazing that the Muslim community in this country, who are struggling so hard for so many years to establish their own identity, and the first thing they do with a convert when they come to convert to Islam is change their name. No, you can't have that name anymore. You've got to be this. You've got to be that. So please, allow us to continue to have our identity. This is very important to us. There is no conflict between being British and being Muslim. Challenge of disillusionment. We read by the mile before we come to Islam. All about the beauty of Islam. And going to the mosque and praying. And as Muslim women, we realize that we're not even allowed into the mosque to pray. So there are these conflicts.
Will the visitors kindly conclude their business and begin to make their way to the exits?
There are There are these major conflicts here, you know, where there's a hypocritical, you know, image of Islam. The purity being preached and the reality being suffered by women whose journey to Islam. So anyway, I don't think we can go through any more, but thank you very much for listening, and inshallah